Hello, friends. Today I am joined by Amber O'Neill Johnston. Amber, thank you so much for joining us today.
Oh, I'm excited to be here. Thank you for having me.
Well, Amber fell in love with the principles of Charlotte Mason when her oldest was a preschooler. After wholeheartedly committing to follow Mason's philosophy, she became disheartened when months went by with little mention, if any, of the stories and accomplishments of Black people in her schoolroom. The literary quality of the books was better, but she found that cultural emptiness she had experienced as a schoolgirl was being perpetuated within the walls of her own home. Committed to bridging the gap for her four children, Amber has embarked on a journey of uniquely merging living books with life giving books and a culturally rich environment to ensure that their education is not a legalistic venture in Charlotte Mason, but an honest experience that honors the truth while helping her children to see value in themselves and others. Amber shares her observations on culturally rich home education, books, travel, and more at heritagemom.com. And when asked about her path, she likes to smile and say that in her house, Charlotte Mason has an afro, which is very fun. And I have been following you on social media. I think was where I first was exposed to your writing and have loved your book recommendations and just the wonder filled approach to education that you communicate. So I'm delighted to get to talk with you today.
Well, thank you so much. I'm so happy to be here.
Well, just here at the beginning, I mean, I know that I just gave the intro, which is always awkward. Like I awkwardly read the bio while staring at the people.
That's okay.
But I would love to hear a little bit about yourself and your family, and then how you guys decided to start homeschooling.
Okay, sure. Yeah. So I'm married to Scott. We have four kids. They are 5, 7, 9, and 11. The littles are boys, the olders are girls. And Scott and I are both from the Midwest. I'm from Illinois. He's from Ohio, but we actually met here in Atlanta. We met at the art museum, which is a really fun story. Yeah, like who would have known? And so we've settled here in Georgia, in a suburb out a ways from the city. And we first started, the children have been homeschooled from the beginning. So before that, I was a stay at home mom. And I kind of had like my progression, I was doing what everyone else was doing. So when it came time for preschool, my girls were in a like preschool program at a church near our home. And it was during that year that I would say kind of like my homeschool awakening kind of started happening. It was actually through my husband, which is not a typical story. Yes. So he is the one who began with a very strong interest in the children being homeschooled. I thought he was kidding like a lot. The first several times he brought it up, I would just giggle. I would just be like, because I just did not see that coming at all. We are both products of public school education. My parents were both public school principals. And so, yeah, this was just not something that was on my radar. And so, around that time that he was talking to me about it, I feel now that I look back at, I feel like it's something that God was doing in my life. But what was happening was I kept running into families who homeschool and I never had before. And so I would notice these women. I didn't know they homeschool, and I would see them interacting with their children and see their families. And I thought to myself, well, there's something I admire this mother. That's what I was thinking. And lo and behold, it kept happening that she was like, oh, I home educate. And I'm like, what? And so, yeah, like after a few of those combined with my husband's nudgings, I decided to, consider it seriously. And I had one angel mom that I met at the park who invited me over to her house to see a day in the life. And that changed everything for me. And I've never forgotten that. So I've opened my home many times since then because I realized I probably wouldn't have done this without her.
When I was a young married mom, maybe I had a baby at this point. I can't remember if my oldest was born. Well, I don't know if you know this, but I'm actually a second generation homeschooler, as is my husband. So we came in knowing we wanted to homeschool. We had both had a really wonderful experience. But, I had just one brother. He was 4 years younger than I was. So I had never really experienced those little years, at least that I could remember in my memory. So I got to go over to a young mom's house and kind of just shadow her for the day. And I remember that being a real encouragement.
It
So
really
we should
is.
probably do that more often in the homeschool community.
I agree, or at least talk about it more, because it is a sacrifice because you have somebody else in your home for the day. So maybe you're needing to stay on schedule more or do something. So it's a sacrifice, but it's just such a strong way of giving back because basically you're just letting someone in to see your style of mothering within a homeschool. And yeah, that it really did make, I still thank her. Like I can barely see this woman without gushing, because of what she gave me. But yes.
Well, how has your approach to homeschooling and kind of educational philosophy grown and changed over the years?
So basically, when we first started, the main reason my husband wanted to homeschool was because he wanted to get my oldest daughter started in school right away, like early. And a year of preschool. And he was like, all right, well, when kindergarten starts in the fall, and we were going to send them to a private Christian school. And I was like, well, actually, no, because she has to do pre K now. And because she has a late birthday. And he was like, what? And so, typical parent, he was like, she's so smart. She's so ready. She's so capable. I can't imagine her being held back by the powers that be. And
A
so
typical firstborn.
exactly. So now I just look back and I think it's hilarious. But that was kind of his motive. So he had done some research and found that in our area that if a child was homeschooled for a couple of years, that they could then roll into their, the next grade with school, even having that late birthday. So that was kind of his master plan. And we started with that as a motive, but it quickly burned off as our main reason as I started researching and getting more, becoming more educated on early child education, homeschooling. And so what started as a drive for like achievement and for her to be ahead and challenged and all of these things kind of morphed into almost the polar opposite of now homeschooling, wanting to cherish a slow childhood and feeling it a privilege to be able to not hold her back, but to just let her be. And so I'm really thankful that early on in our first year, so that year of preschool, I was researching the whole time, knowing that we would probably homeschool. So just during that year, to have met so many different voices online and through books that spoke that same message to me again. I had been reading Last Child in the Woods by Louvre, and then I'm encountering the writings of Charlotte Mason during that year, and he's talking about the problems with children who aren't in nature. She's talking about spending time outside and delaying formal academic education until the child's a little older. And so when it all kind of shook out, I was prepared to kind of move in to a Charlotte Mason style of homeschooling from the very beginning, using her principles in our homeschool. So that's kind of where we started. I knew I wanted to do a literature-based approach to homeschooling, and that's kind of where I ended up, and I've been doing that ever since.
As I've talked to so many different moms in the Homeschool Conversations podcast, it's been really fun to see how many different reasons were the initial, kind of surfacey reason for starting homeschool, but then how over the years things have kind of changed. And I think God can bring families into home education through many different pathways and then kind of surprise us with what we learn and how things progress as we
Yeah.
kind of walk alongside our kids.
I agree. I think like you have what you need in the beginning. Maybe whatever your family needs or whatever can see you through that first step. And then once you enter into the homeschooling world, I guess I'll say, so many other things become eye-opening and become important, and you end up kind of reordering in a lot of ways, reordering what's important to your family. I mean, I wouldn't have even had the vocabulary to express the things that are most important to us now. I had to kind of get here first. And so I do think that that is a gift in the way that he gives you what you need at the time, and then kind of opens your eyes more and more to what maybe the message really is once you're there. He gives you exactly what you can handle at that moment.
It's a process and an adventure, and you're constantly learning and repenting and growing, and you don't have to have it all figured out. Like if a new homeschool mom is listening, it's okay if you don't have it all figured out. Nobody does.
No, I totally agree. And that's actually one of the beautiful things, though, because you don't, the, the only thing that really needs to change in order for there to be change is for you to change your mind. You know, I've changed my mind about small and big things, and it's kind of nice. I have a, you know, we have a parent teacher conference. That's my husband and I. And we're like, and we're going to do it this way. You know, like we're going to change, or we talk and we're like, you know, we don't feel this way anymore. And as a result of that, that we're able to actually shift things in our home. It could be our family culture, our schedule, or whatever it is that we feel that we've in an area where we've grown. So I think that's really good advice that you just gave. Like we don't have to feel like whatever you decide today is your forever. I have people ask me all the time, well, what about high school? I'm like, my oldest just turned 11. Like I think about it sometimes, but I'll figure it out, you know, but that's not what I spend my time. I'm going to shed multiple times before I get there. Molt, you know what I mean? Multiple times before we get there.
Yeah, it's a living thing.
Yeah.
Well, we've already started talking about some of the wonderful parts of homeschooling, but what would you say is your favorite part about homeschooling?
Oh, definitely. It's the lifestyle and the schedule. So for me, I just love the flow of how we wake up in the morning and we have yummy hot breakfast. And, you know, sometimes we start school right away, or sometimes we don't, and we're just playing. Or the last couple of mornings, my kids have awakened to snow. I mean, if you want to call it that, powder dust on the lawn, and I know that as soon as the sun comes up it's going to melt away, so they are getting all hats and gloves and way too much stuff, that what they more than they need, but they never get a chance to use it in Georgia, and they've been outside playing in the snow, and that gave us a delayed start from when we normally start. Love that. I love being able to take lots of field trips, to travel when we want. When my mom comes to town, school is totally different. Like she just got here. We're not thinking about that right now. We're just cuddling and loving on her. And so I feel like school is life and life is school, and it's all intertwined. And to me, that's what I find to be most valuable.
Yeah. Well, we all know that homeschooling is not always easy. It may be lovely, but it's not always easy. What are some of the more challenging parts of homeschooling, and how do you seek to overcome those challenges?
I think a couple of the most challenging things. One is that I have found, without a doubt, that the mood and spirit of my home revolves and is only dependent on one person, and that's me.
Mom.
Yes. It's so like it's kind of a lot of pressure because some days I'm just not having a good day. I don't know, you call it waking up on the wrong side of the bed. Maybe I stayed up too late, which is typically my issue, is that those late nights when my husband and kids have gone to bed and I'm alone. I relish that time, and sometimes I'm not diligent and responsible about that time and getting to bed early enough. And so I wake up, I'm groggy, I'm crabby, irritable, impatient. At other times, maybe something really is going on. Maybe I've experienced some type of loss, or, you know, maybe husband and I are not seeing eye to eye and I'm not feeling him or the kids, you know? And so whatever it may be, I realize that I have to go into, for me, it's prayer, a time of prayer and a time of reflection, and really just recommitting myself some mornings to what I set out to do. Because if I walk out of my room in the feeling that irritability and letting it show and shine through to my family, our entire day and sometimes week spirals into what feels like out of control. So I think that that's very difficult. When I worked, before I worked in corporate America, and if I was having a bad day, it was very much usually only impacting me. You know what I mean? I might be a little quiet that day, but everything else is going on just fine. No one cares about me and my bad attitude. And that's not the case with home education. And I think one of the other things that can be difficult is that I want to give all of my children a lot of individual time, because I see how they blossom when we're spending that time one-on-one, just snuggled up with a book or having a deep conversation. And I just find that very difficult to do. I love it when it happens, but so often one of my children is talking to me. Maybe it's usually one of the older girls, and she's sharing her heart or telling me about a great part of a book. And I've got someone tugging at my leg, and someone's hungry, and the phone is ringing, and the repair guy's here, and I'm not able to give her what I want. And so that weighs heavily on my heart. And so it happens a lot with homeschooling because we're all here so intensely, but I imagine an aspect of that would be the case even if we weren't homeschooling. And so I try to keep a mental note and to circle back later that evening, even if it's hours and hours later, and say, earlier today you were telling me about that, your favorite part or what you just read in that book, or about a funny song you heard, and I didn't get a chance to finish listening to it, but I'm all ears now. I'd really like to hear about the rest of it. And I don't always get that right, but I do try. I really do try. So I think those are the areas, they're heart areas that I struggle with the most with homeschooling, more so than structural areas.
It would be so easy if we could just, have our little checklist and get our little academic boxes checked off and then be like, oh, everything worked out well for the homeschool. But so much of it has to
Yes.
do with relationship, our hearts, our children's hearts, just the relationships, just sort of that real life stuff, which goes back to the best part of homeschooling. Kind of the flip side of it is it's also the hard part many times, at least in my family.
I totally agree. And I mean, it makes sense when you think about it, because I always think about that with my children, like the areas of my children's personalities that are like the negative things that are just, I also don't want to smash them, because I recognize those are also their strengths, like that the child who doesn't want to back down, or the child that, is always speaking her mind, or won't ever kind of let it go, or anything like that. I'm just like, wow, that could take you so far, though, that on one hand we can say that it feels frustrating now, but later I can see that being described as diligence and passion and things like
standing
that.
up for truth and justice and all those
That's
things we don't
right.
want them to compromise on.
That's
Like
right.
in
That's
the middle of the grocery store is not really where we want them building that, but
it
one
happens.
day the Lord
Yeah.
can redeem that.
Yes. Yeah. So I see this homeschool as another, it has its personality, and the flip, what's good about it is also what can be difficult about it. And, it is the way it is. I know that everyone's not called, for this lifestyle, but those of us that have been, or those who think that it might be something that they would be interested in, I just feel like there's just so many mighty blessings that come out of it, that it's really, really hard, but that should show people how mighty the blessings are, that we would be willing to walk through that much difficulty and still feel like we're coming out ahead.
Yeah, it's 100% worth it. Sometimes I say it's the best hard thing I do.
Yes, yes.
Well, Amber, one of the things you discuss on your blog and social media is this concept of books as mirrors and windows, or mirrors or windows, I guess. Could you explain that idea a little bit here and explain how this has influenced the books that you choose to include in your own homeschool?
Sure. So the idea, and I did not come up with the idea. I read about it. There was a former professor, Rudine Sims Bishop at Ohio State University, and she wrote a paper about it years and years ago. And I stumbled upon it when I was in the throes of complete confusion. So I was doing all the things that I had read about and that I saw other moms online doing with their homeschool, particularly moms that were following the Charlotte Mason philosophy, but it really extended beyond that, just moms in general. I was doing, our studies, and we were having lesson time and the wonder and magic and all the things, and my kids were participating, and all was well, except it wasn't. So my oldest daughter really started to exhibit signs of what I feel is self-hatred, a form of self-hatred, anything related that you would think of as being related to being African American. So that's the color of her skin, curly hair, being around other, her family. She would even ask me, why am I the only person with a brown mom? And I'm like,
Yeah.
because you're brown, like what is she not understanding? But there was a lot of shame. There was a lot of confusion from her end. And I just could not figure it out. So I'm just going along and I'm like, where is this coming from? My husband and I never, ever talked about things like that. We never talked about, race or skin color. We never talked about other people in any type of negative way. So I don't understand why she would be doing this. Of like a whole year, but essentially at the end of the day, she was able to articulate to me that we never study any Black people in our school. And she associated that with Black people hadn't really done anything worth studying. I mean, it makes sense. She was young and she's like, if they had done something worth studying, we would have been studying it. And we don't ever study Black people. And I was like, when she said that, I was like, oh, so true. It's so true. And then I went through this, time of humiliation or embarrassment, because how could I, as a Black mother, not have thought of that? But I realized I also am a product of an education that didn't reflect me. And so it didn't stand out to me immediately that things could be different or that things should be different. So I was a much more complacent child. So I never would have said anything. I never did say anything. I just kind of thought this is what education in America is. And she is not a complacent child. So she is like, hey, yo, what's up? Like, there's no people at all that look like me in any of these books. And she didn't like it. And so God used her to wake me up. And there's nothing that can wake a mother up than the pain of her child. And so I started really digging in and studying. And that's where I came across this concept of books being mirrors that reflect back to a child. So reflecting, through words and through the illustrations. I mean, she was really young, so part of it were the pictures in the books. And, just to clarify, it's not that we didn't have any books with any Black characters. They were on the shelf, and sometimes we would read them at bedtime and things like that, but they were kind of like on our fun shelf. They weren't a part of school. So that's kind of a big difference. But, the pictures of girls with big hair and who had grandmas that were coming, and maybe those grandmas were humming songs while they're making cornbread and things that felt familiar to our family. She wasn't seeing those things. And in our history, we weren't reading about anybody at all that really wasn't white. And so that kind of set off an idea in my head. Here's a child who's in pain. She's expressed to me amazingly of what's missing in her life. And here's this concept that I could use to help me frame what was happening. And I just dug in from there. So my study in terms of like building our home library and changing our homeschool curriculum was really rooted in helping her to see herself reflected in our school books. Now, that wasn't a complete overhaul, because sometimes I've heard all the like positive feedback. I've also heard the negative feedback. Like, well, isn't that wrong? You just changed everything to be Black? And I'm like, no, not everything. That's silly. That's very black and white thinking. I didn't change everything. I changed some things. So when we read biographies, we include biographies about Black people. They're not all Black, but a lot of them. And in the Charlotte Mason education, you study musicians and composers, and you study great artists. And I include Black people in those things. And in historical fiction, we like to read about what Black people were doing at the time too. And in our nonfiction history as well, and in poetry and just everything. So I didn't wholly replace anyone as labeling good or bad, or get out with the old and with the new. It was more a scoot over and make room for us at the table.
It wasn't a narrowing, it was an opening. It was going bigger, not somehow going smaller.
Right, that's it. And it's not like, yes, that did mean I had to take some things away, because let's say you're studying 3 artists in a year, then yeah, I'm taking out, 1 or 2 of the white artists and I'm replacing them with other people. But still, there's no formula for it. Sometimes, like right now, we're studying medieval times and the Middle Ages. Oh, help me. I mean, it's been a rough time. Okay. So I have some history books. We've been studying what's going on in, African kingdoms and things like that. But music and art from Black people during the Middle Ages, yeah, that hasn't been going so much. So like that. So this is a term where you would say, we aren't doing as much of that across the board. But I also infuse people from other time periods, but we just make it work. It's really a dance. It's not a formula. And I just dance with it. Sometimes we pull from here, sometimes we pull from there. And the whole time just being the idea being that the world is full of people. We love them all, including ourselves. And we can just kind of dance from one to the other and just cover it all as humanity.
Yeah. And I love that you were able to listen to your daughter, and what a gift that she was able to articulate at such a young age. I mean, that's a gift that she was able to verbalize what she was thinking and feeling, and that you had the heart to listen to her. And then, like you said, not coming up with like a formula, a checklist, but again, kind of going the same thing that keeps coming up. Education is this living thing, this growing thing, this just relational thing. And it was very much about that, which I love.
Yeah, that's exactly what happened.
Well, are there any books or authors that you guys have come to love or that you've realized seem to be kind of missing or ignored that we should be adding to our library hold lists?
Well, our favorite author is Patricia McKissick, and I've never really seen any of her books on any list. She unfortunately passed away some years ago, but she was a very prolific writer. She often wrote with her husband, Fred McKissick, and so sometimes you'll see both names on there. But they had an array of fiction and nonfiction. And I've read some interviews from before she passed, and she talked about basically she wanted to provide a body of work that was exactly what my family needed. And she talked about how these stories weren't being told and that she set out to spend her life telling them. And she did. So we've been, I'm not a book collector. People are often surprised at that. I talk about books a lot and I recommend books a lot. I'm not actually collecting them, I'm getting them to use with my kids. But I do collect her books because we're trying to get all of them that we can. A lot of them are out of publication. So that's that one author that I follow. So I do think that she has some books about life during the time periods of enslavement, but then before that, and the greatness of major African kingdoms of like Mali and Sangay. And she has so many beautiful stories, like storybooks, full of stories that really speak to the African American experience in a beautiful, beautiful way. So I can't say enough about her.
I will definitely have to check and see if we have her books in our library. I don't remember hearing
You
that.
may have, though. I mean, sometimes for a long time, we had been reading here and there books by her, and I just wasn't aware. I don't always pay as much attention to the author and illustrator as I probably should. I'm just moving along. Like, this is a great story. Let's read it. But after a while, we kept saying, we really like this book, and we really like this book. I think it was one of my girls who made the connection. They're like, Mommy, the same person wrote this book. Yeah. And so we started paying attention, and I realized like, oh, wow, like she's written so much. So yeah, I'll be interested for you to check it out and see what you think.
Yeah. Another thing I find with finding those, like you were mentioning the authors, that, oh, it's the same author of the book. Something that I kind of will end up going on rabbit trails is I'll follow the illustrator. So if you find the illustrator of a book, you're like, wow, I love the way they're depicting this story. You can search for the illustrator in your library system and discover new favorites, and then you find new authors, and then you go down those rabbit trails. It's very fun.
That is so true. That's so true. I just kind of posted a recommended like holiday Christmas list, and there's a book on there where Patricia McKissick wrote it and Jerry Pinkney illustrated, and Jerry Pinkney is one of our favorite illustrators. And so when I found that book, I was like, what? Just like the two of them teamed up. Like, why am I surprised? I shouldn't be surprised. So you're right. And then you follow kind of the Jerry Pinkney rabbit hole and find a bunch of things. So yeah, that's been it. I think it's really important. I like for moms to know that I'm not a historian. I am not an expert. I'm, you know, our home library was born out of necessity and just sprinkled with a whole lot of love. And I'm learning as I go along. So I can say today, oh, I love Jerry Pinkney. Oh, I love Patricia McKissick. But like 6 years ago, I had no idea who either of those people were. So, be kind to yourself and patient as you get into a rhythm with your family and start to naturally develop your favorites. You don't have to run out and try to learn everything and know everything. And you get recommendations from friends, and you just kind of land naturally where you're going to be. It doesn't have to be a forced thing.
Yeah, that's a really good wise word there.
Mhm.
Well, changing gears a little bit, and this came up in the beginning of our conversation, sort of your changing ideas about early education. But one of the things I just love, I love the stories you will share on social media and pictures of your boys and this slow, beautiful, wonderful childhood that you are trying to give them. And so I'm just imagining, maybe a mom of littles, and there can be a lot of pressure sometimes to like achieve something great or do some sort of big thing, as a mom of littles. And can you just talk a little bit about the value of a story saturated life and that more slow childhood?
Absolutely. So I am trying to give my children something that I had a wonderful childhood, but what I'm looking at now and trying to gift to the children is something that is really simple, but very hard. So it's not complicated, but it's extremely hard because I'm trying to pull back and resist the urge to pace my children against other children. And that can be so difficult because from the moment our children are born, we're like, when did they crawl? And, what percentile are they? And how long did you nurse? And when did they walk and say their first words? And we're pacing, right? The whole baby book concept is set up to record all the milestones that are pacing. Your pediatrician appointments are pacing. And so I am fighting against that mentality to just let them be. Now, before I got into that, I'm going to tell you, I had to read a lot of books about that because at first I was like, I don't know about that, just be what though? And I had a lot of misconceptions like, does this mean this child just runs free and misbehaves and acts crazy? Or what about, when are they going to learn their ABCs and their math? And I don't want my kid to be behind and all of that. So I did a lot of reading, and then I did a lot of praying, and it sat well with me. It sat well with me the same way a mother knows when to pick her baby up and when to let him fuss a little bit. A mother knows what each cry is. And as I thought about this kind of wonder-filled slow childhood, I felt like this was something for my kids. And so basically, we don't begin formal academics until around 6. And for me, it's not exactly when they turn 6, like on their 6th birthday, but I usually start like the school year after they turn 6, just giving them as long as possible to be let alone, I guess I would call it. That's a lot of time spent playing outside, but also a lot of time underfoot with me and the siblings, exploring things, making things. We read a lot and tell stories, read stories. Um, it's almost like what parents do, maybe stay-at-home moms do with their kids before they put them in school, but like I'm still doing it. Like we're still living that extended maybe preschool period, but they're growing though. They're not stunted in preschool life, and they get all that they want and need. They pull from it, and I provide what it is that they're pulling or what they're seeking or searching for.
Yeah.
So.
It's not necessarily measurable in a worksheet kind of way, but they're still growing. They're not just like feral children in the neighborhood.
No, not
Right.
at all. Like we have discipline, like we have family rules and expectations, and they have work, they have chores that they're doing and work that they have to contribute to the home. And I feel like this type of thing, what I'm talking about, it really only works in a learning rich environment. So the idea is that they are soaking up many of the same things that would be on a checklist, but it's done naturally and through through play and just through experience, a lot of conversation. So I talk all day long. And so, I'm going to mix up the pancakes. I was thinking I could use an instant pancake mix today, but instead I'm just going to actually pour all the dry ingredients and make them from scratch this time because Daddy likes it like that. So let's grab the flour. Okay, man, it got ground up from the wheat outside. Grab the sugar, and so a lot of narrating as I go about my day. And so they learn a lot through that and reading, interacting with the siblings. And we do, my kids know stuff, but I didn't set out to do it. And so I think like one thing that really helped spur me on is in our state, children are required to do standardized testing every 3 years. And so my oldest, when she got to third grade, it's starting in third grade is when it has to start. I was just like, oh, I'll just do this because it's a law, whatever. I'm not going to care about it or whatever. And I know I haven't been teaching her that stuff. It's going to be fine. I don't care what it says. She sat down and just like, blah, 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 blah. And I was like, what? And I was like, okay, wait, I don't care about these things. I'm so above this. But I was like, this childhood of her just living, we go places in the community and people talk to her and she's learning. And look at that. And so I thought to myself, there's something here. Children there is a body of knowledge, I guess, that we kind of would like kids to get around such and such time. And kids get really close to that target without the pressure, without it. They get really close. And sometimes they lag. I have one that's, she goes like this. So she gets it and then she looks like she doesn't. And I'm wondering like, oh my gosh, do I need to shut my blog down? I don't know what I'm talking about. And then the next thing I turn around and she totally has it. It's fine. So I think it's not a changing of expectations of where your child will end up. It's a changing of expectation of how they'll get there.
I love what you just said. That is so fantastic. And it's something I am really passionate about, encouraging moms, especially with like the preschool years and kindergarten in particular. And different children, will be ready to sort of start more formal academics at a variety of times because children are individuals.
Yes.
But it's so important to me to just communicate to these mamas, these precious little ones, read with them, talk with them, be with them, give them the curiosity and the wonder and the imagination. That is going to be so valuable. Earlier this week, my little 5-year-old, who's my youngest guy too, he was setting the table with forks. And so he's standing in there at the drawer and he says, "Mommy, how many people are in our family?" And I said, "Well, how many children are in our family?" And he said, 5. "And how many parents?" I said, 2. I said, "Okay, so how many do you think that is altogether?" And he's like thinking for a minute. He figures it out. Oh, it's 7. So then he has the 3 small forks and the 3 big forks in his hand, in each hand. He says, "Is this enough?" And I said, "Well, how many do you have?" And we're just sort of walking through this very natural, we're just in the kitchen talking about the forks, and he's figured out now addition, greater than, less than, subtraction, how many more he needs. And that is without pressure, if it just, this is part of normal life and you're developing that love and curiosity, you don't know the answer. Well, I'm not going to tell you the answer. Let's ask questions and figure it out. So
yes, that's a perfect example. That's exactly what I was trying to say, because I think that sometimes a misconception when I'm talking, people are like, so you just don't teach your kids anything. They kind of just walk around playing with Play-Doh all day. And I'm just like, no, I'm not saying it correctly, but that is a perfect example. They are learning. I am teaching them. It's just that it's coming about naturally, and it always does. Again, at different pace, like you said, different times. And that's the part that the mom has to be willing to live in, that tension and discomfort, if we're used to coming from a system where there is no latitude. This by this time. And, I guess I would say what I've seen with children is they don't know all of those at this time, but they sometimes know way more. And then sometimes they don't know something yet. And then they get it next year or tomorrow. And again, and I just, I feel like this works in a learning rich environment, because that's another time I've seen some environments where, this probably wouldn't work. So I'm not talking about, a child that's just alone all the time or doesn't have people pouring into them. But in these learning rich environments, the kids pick it up so quickly.
Although full disclosure, my 5-year-old also really loves Ninjago. So,
Yeah. Oh yeah. Well, I mean, if we want to go there, I mean, that's for sure. Like I remember posting something and people really got a kick out of it. I'm like, no, this is really real. My boys woke me up super early one morning and they were all ready to packed up for camping. This was several months ago. I'm sorry, not camping, for skiing. This was several months ago and we weren't going until like January is usually when we ski. And I was like, okay, next time, turn down that wild and free vibe and go in the basement and turn on Netflix till mommy gets up. You know what I mean? So like there's the realness to that as well, And I think that's what's great about it. It's like we are my kids live in the real world. I haven't they are in a little bit of what some people call a bubble. I've renamed it as a love incubator. So they are in my love incubator.
Yeah, I'm stealing that. Love
Yeah,
that.
please do. Because I've heard that so much. Oh, it's a bubble. I'm like, love incubator. But within that, they very much are still, experiencing the things that all little boys experience and enjoying that. So
I can't wait to tell my teens that they're in my love incubator.
they'll love that.
They'll love it. Well, Amber, here at the end, I'm going to ask you 2 questions I'm asking all my guests in season 3. And the first one is just, what are you reading lately?
Okay, so I am in a series of like pre-reading mode, trying to get on top of some things for my oldest child. So this is going to sound really, really crazy because normally I'm not reading this, but I'm reading Twelfth Night from Shakespeare right now. And I'm not going to lie, that's not my choice of what I would like to be especially reading. Um, and I'm going to have to give it to you in the show notes. I'm just starting a book by an author. She's Nigerian and I don't want to mess up her name. But I'm going to send that to you. And it's the protagonist in the book is a little bit older than my daughter. And so I want to make sure that, it's an appropriate level for her. We're also in the midst of Anne Voskamp's Advent book, The Greatest Gift, I think, that we ever received. I'm bad at titles, but we're on day 2 of that book as well. So just kind of a little bit here and there of a lot of different things.
Nice. Well, with Twelfth Night or the Shakespeare, I always recommend audiobook version, like the audio drama or something, because Shakespeare is not meant to be read. If you try to just read it like a book, it's not as much fun.
No, we have all those Archangel recordings, which are really, really good. The music and all that.
Mm-hmm. The Comedy of Errors one, David Tennant is one of the protagonists, and my kids knew him not from Doctor Who at the time, but they knew him from, he was also the narrator for the How to Train Your Dragon series.
Oh, cool.
So when we turned on the Shakespeare play, they were like, oh, we know his voice, It was very exciting.
Yes. Oh, yes. That's so funny. Yeah, they love that.
Well, the final question is just, what advice or encouragement would you give to a mama whose homeschool day seems to be going completely off the rails?
Whew. I would say take some time off. That's never a bad thing. And look at what is giving you life and what's going well and how you can maybe protect that or do more of it. Maybe you don't need to do more. Maybe it's just a protection of that. Look at what isn't going well and decide whether it's worth fixing or if it's something you need to throw away or just put away. Some things I still am planning to implement, but they're put away right now because this wasn't my season for that. Some things I've thrown away. I'm just not going to do those things ever, probably. So kind of prioritizing and then looking at what's worth fixing right now and looking for a new way of doing that. I read once where it said that a change is as good as a break. Or something similar. And so sometimes it's just changing the way that you're doing something that could make it feel refreshing again. But first, I just think like a reset is sometimes in order. And as homeschool moms, we often feel like we have to be doing school, like school, or this is not a planned break, but if I take a week off now, then what will I have to get that week back later? And I'm just like, just stop. And even though you're not going to the beach or to Disney or go see grandma, just have a staycation of your mind in your own home and take some time and figure out where you want to go and how best to get there. And chances are there's some things that maybe you've been trying to do that it's just too much, and that it's okay to put something in a parking lot. It doesn't mean that you'll never do it with your children, and just cut back and cut back and cut back as oh my gosh, I forgot her name right now, but there's a book where she says, cut back until you have peace. Keep cutting back until you have peace.
That is such an encouragement. Actually, I kind of needed to hear that today, that reminder that saying not right now, putting something to the side, doesn't mean you're giving up or you're saying you're never going to do it. I think sometimes it's just hard to give yourself that space to put it to the side and not feel like you're giving up. And that was an encouragement. So thanks.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thank you.
Amber, where can people find you all around the internet?
Well, I blog at heritagemom.com. I put lots of book recommendations and other things there. And I'm really active on Instagram at Heritage Mom Blog. I also have a Heritage Mom Facebook page if you're not on Instagram. And I have a pathetic YouTube page. If you can find it, that's my gift to you. All like 8 videos maybe. So someday I'll get back to that. That's on my not right now shelf right now. So that's pretty much where I hang out online.
And I will put links to all those things, including the mysterious YouTube channel, in the show notes for this episode over at humilityanddoxology.com. Thanks so much for chatting with us today.
Oh, thanks for having me. I appreciate it.